Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is that we're going to create a plane, and we're going to start cutting that plane to align to this tree. So I'm going to click on plane, left click, drag. If I hold down control, it'll scale uniformly. So remember guys, the moment you create a plane, it'll always have its unwrap completely done for you. Like it'll be completely laid out. So which means that you can easily just grab your completed texture and throw it onto the plane. I'm going to go here to material. I'm going to select a brand new material. I'm going to go to maps, diffuse color, click on no map, and then bitmap. I'm going to go to my desktop, find where I saved the locations. I'm going to use diffuse. So select diffuse, open. And now I'm going to go back to go to parent to go back to my original stack. And I'm going to go to opacity, click on no map, click on bitmap, and I want to use. So one thing I want to point out here, guys, is that it's you can't really use an individual channel in 3ds Max. You can, but it's a bit more difficult. You would have to literally destroy 2 outer channels. So the easiest way to do this is just to use the original mask we had, the branch A. So if you open that up, it should load up that mask. You can see it right here. Just make sure you have realistic mode on. So if you go to shaded mode, make sure you have realistic on and pushed in. Throw it onto your plane, and you should have something that looks like this. You can throw your normals on it as well. Although cutting right now, like the normals doesn't really matter, but just to preview it, we can do it. So I'll go to bitmap, normal bump, normal, and then bitmap. Open. Okay, looks a lot better. Okay, so what we're going to do now is they're going to start cutting this. So I'm going to hit Alt and Q to isolate it. I'm going to make sure to put an edit poly onto this. But before we do that, if you press F4, you can see that there's a lot of segments to this. So I want to actually get rid of that. Set everything to 1. Put an edit poly onto this. And now I want to start cutting. So I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. We're going to create this so that it has some connections going through it. So I want to make sure that my cuts are evened out. So I'm going to make sure there's a cut here, to here, and then there, then right to the points. And then I'm going to mimic the same cuts. So I'm going to put another cut here, here, and then here, and another one here. If you did have something accidentally moved like this, so I cut this off by a little bit, what you can do is just go down here, click on preserve UVs, press 1, select on this point, and then you can move it without destroying it. And that's what I'll do now. I'll just kind of go around and move it. But you can see some areas do break. So what we're doing here is that we're going to do connections like this. And another connection here. Now what I need to do is I need to press 2 to go in edge mode. Click on insert vertice and insert a vertice right there. And then that way I can select on this and connect that, and I probably can do another connection here as well, so I can do another cut. Actually, you know what I'll do, guys? I'll select on this, I'll enable constraints, so this is also Shift X to enable it. I'll move this line down like that. You can see by me moving it, it's not destroying the UVs at all. And I'm just evening out the spacing now. Remember, I'm using conform edges or constraints here. I need to make sure everything is also still inside the actual box though. So that's the important thing. So obviously you don't want anything like that to happen. So make sure I have constraints on. Okay, it's still happening. If it's still happening, what I can do is just remove this line. And then I'll move this vertice. Okay, still happening. Let me move this vertice then. Two, insert a vertice. Oh no, I didn't do it. Let me do this instead. Let me remove this. Actually, let me see if we can connect this. Oh, it's causing a problem. That's pretty weird. So what what I'll do, because every time I do this, it is destroying the UVs. So what I'll do is that first I'll just make our shape, and then what we'll do is that we'll just change the UVs afterwards. So let me connect that with preserve UVs on. Control C. Make sure this is evened out. So right now I'm just making sure everything is evened out, like that, and then I'm going to delete the border. Like that, and only have this. Now what I need to do is I need to put an unwrap onto this, just because it did break the UVs, and I need to make sure that this is nicely straightened and flattened. So unfold. Let me pelt it. That's weird. There might be extra edges onto this, so let me see about that. First, let me make sure everything is welded. Okay. Unfold. Alright, it's still coming in broken. Alright, let me reset the X forms. It's like my plane is double-sided. Let me double check on this. Yeah, there's some weirdness happening. Let me just make another plane. And what I'll do is that with the plane, make sure it's uniform. I'm going to make sure that I do have segments onto it. So I'm going to add segments this time. Maybe I put a little bit more, maybe 5. Press M. Throw on my material, and what I'll do is I could use this modifier right here called UV map. What UV map is that you can project your actual texture onto this gizmo, so you can change it to a cylinder, different shape. We want to use a plane, and with the plane what we can do is that we can select the gizmo and we can rotate it like that. And we can also change the scale of it and make it larger, like that. So I'm just going to make it like this. And then what I can do is I can just draw around it. Edit poly, go to connect. Or cut, sorry. And I'll start cutting this out. Okay, so now just delete all these other polygons. And then I'll optimize this. So what I'll do is I'll make sure I have preserve UVs on, and then I'll start welding this like that. Now I gotta make sure I don't destroy UVs. Let me see if I can remove this. Okay, so get rid of that. Let me weld this. Let me remove this. Actually, I'll leave that in and I'll get rid of this. Alright, this here I can definitely fix up. So yeah, that looks pretty good. It's nicely evened out. Now the reason I did this is because what you could do is that now you can deform it, make it into a different shape, make it look like a different branch. So if I select on this, I can go into my hierarchy, click on Effect Pivot Only, and then I want to definitely only move the pivot points. I want to even change, make sure you're in orthographic view for this, but you want to make sure that this is set right where your branch is. Right there. Maybe, yeah, maybe closer to the base. Actually, right in the middle here will work because you want this to be inside the tree. Perfect. So now that's done. Now, the next thing we need to do, I'm going to delete this old one. Next thing we need to do is that we need to make sure everything is proper sizes. So I'm going to do a character box. I'm going to make sure it is 180. And I'll give them some thickness, say 30 by 30. So you can see that this is a lot smaller than it actually needs to be. Oh, this is way too small, so I'm going to scale this up. Same thing with this. Scale it up. A little bit too big. I'm going to set it to 0, 0, 0. Yeah, it's still too, I don't want my character to be that high, right? So this is still too small. Maybe something like that. Perfect. All right. So now this branch, how big is this branch? This branch looks way too big to be onto this tree. So I also need to make sure that this is changed. So this branch, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the scale of it. Make it smaller. Make sure it looks proper to my tree. Maybe I can make it a bit smaller. A good medium size, guys, a good medium size. All right, so now, the reason why we did this, all these lines, all these extra geometries, because if I select on this, make a copy of it. In fact, before I do that, let me name this properly. Let me make sure I name this to branch underscore 001. I can make this a copy. Click on create copy. And what I can do is I can throw a modifier on here like FFD, FFD3. And then with FFD, what I can do is I can select on the control points and I can just pretty much change this and make it look like a much cooler branch on an angle. I can even do that as well. Maybe something like that. And then what I can do is that now, because this is locked onto the side, I can select on this, click on rotate. If I hold shift and rotate, I can make a copy of it. So I want to make sure that this is on about a 45-degree angle. So let me make sure my angle snaps are on. Change this, make sure it says 45 or 90, sorry, 90 should be proper. 90. And then what I can do is that now I can go back into the FFD and I can change this one as well. There we go. Let me also change this angle like that. And if I press F4 to hide it, you can see that we're getting more of a branch here. So let me just change some of this positioning. Perfect. Another thing to note is that this material right now is not double-sided. So if you click on that, it should be double-sided. Okay. Now what I want to do is I'm going to create different variations of this branch, and then you would stick it onto this. But before we do that, we can create the variations on this tree. Now this is a fairly good starting base, but obviously we can create more variations. I can get this, make a copy of it, select on it, rotate it, put it onto an angle, 90-degree angle. Now normally with branches, you don't want them to be in fully 90 degrees. You don't want to see a branch like this because otherwise it looks unrealistic with this. So what I would do is that I would rotate it like that. More on like a 45-degree angle. And then what I can do is that with this, just FYI guys, your textures, like everything that doesn't appear properly in 3ds Max, it'll look a lot better in Unreal. Now I can go here to FFD, create an FFD3. Kind of just change everything. I can even change the scale if I wanted to. Make these leaves come out a bit more there. select on this, do the same thing, FFT. In fact, let me use this one because I do want it to be kind of curvish, like this. Because if it's curved, you don't see the flatness as much. So maybe I'll curve it like that. Get this. Probably I'll realign the pivot points. So it's pretty much on that exact same plane in space. And now if I rotate this with Shift enabled, so if I hold down Shift, I'll make a copy. And I basically do a copy like that. And move that a bit closer. Maybe I can rotate it a bit like that. And then probably do another rotation like this. And maybe do one more on the back. But your goal is to try to make this look good from almost all angles. Except from the top. Top you can't really do anything about it. Okay, so guys, now what I'll do is I would attach all of this. So I'll click on one, create an edit poly, click attach, and start attaching all of these together. Perfect. So we can change some of these later on, but right now this is good enough. You could also try to optimize this after the word. So let's just see if we can do that. If I make a copy of this, I can select on this, I can use Pro Optimize. Click on Generate. So you can see that it does kind of destroy the UVs. So what I would have to do is when I put a Pro Optimizer on it, I would have to make sure to click on Keep Textures, Keep UV Boundaries, and click on that option. And now I can reduce it. And you can see that it becomes a lot more optimized. So if I set this to 100, let me go here to settings and enable my statistics. Total plus selection and my try count. So right now I'm sitting on about 100 triangles for this one bush. So if I optimize this, you can see that I can get it down quite a bit without hurting the detail too much. So I'll probably set it to around, say, 70. Remember, you can always further optimize it in Unreal. Right now this is good enough. And now, so with this selected, guys, what I can do is I can go to this option right here called Object Paint. And right under here, Paint Objects, you can click on this option to enable Paint with Selected Objects. And now you get this whole menu. If I left click and paint, you can see right now it doesn't do anything. I need to click on this commit and click on this object paint on. Oh no. So I've been creating it's just a really small. Alright, so let's try that again. Click on paint. Oh, now I'm just painting in trees. So let me select on my branch. Click on paint. I want to make sure this is my scale up here. So you can see if I left click and paint, it creates very tiny pieces of geometry. In fact, before I paint it, guys, let me actually just reset the X forms because it could be playing a factor into this. Collapse all. Let me do it for my tree as well. Reset X forms. collapse all. Alright, so now I can select on this, click on paint, go here, left click, there we go. So there was the X forms that was screwing it up. So you can see how basically paint objects work. Now obviously this is going crazy, so you don't want this many. So you need to kind of play around with these settings here. So this is basically your scale. So you can click on this option even, or you can click on random. And random basically means a measurement between 20 to 200. So you can see when I paint, it's an average. So I could do this, I could do 100 and say 50. So there's an average between 50 and 100. So you can see that they're all different sizes, variation. Now let's do that for this section as well. So you can see this is rotation. So we have it set to random. Let's see how the rotation works. Yeah, they'll always be facing one similar direction. So basically what I will do is that it's very hard to just paint strokes. You can always change the spacing as well. You can increase the spacing if you wanted to. And that way it'll be a little bit better. So you can click on selected objects. So you only paint on the selected objects. Oh, don't want to paint trees. Oh, I can't use this option. So the idea, guys, is that you would go onto these branches. Basically what I'll do for these is that I'll make the larger branches over here. So I can probably change this probably around 100 to say 200. I'll left click once. Okay. Create another one there. Another one there. Another one there. 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 Now you can see the positioning is not correct. However, we place them. This is going to save us a lot of time. All we have to do now is select on them, use rotate, and just reposition them. Right, you always want to make sure that the branches are nicely spread out. So most likely they just need to be realigned. So the good thing is that in the future, what I would recommend is that use a base color that matches your actual base of your tree. For now, for ours, we just randomly created it, so you can see there's a slight difference in color.
all going to be one pitch.
Alright, so now what I'll do is I'll paint in smaller brushes or smaller brushes. So I'll select on this, click on paint object, and make sure to lower this to something like 140.
So afraid he's gonna probably get super at it. And I was gonna be like, well. No, whatever business you want,
Okay. So basically there's our tree. So now what we're going to do is we're going to attach everything. So I'm going to select on my tree, going to attach, 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 attach. Keep on attaching everything. In fact, the easiest way to do this is just to hide these guys. Select this, hit Alt and Q to isolate, select on my tree base, go to attach, hit on settings, attach from list, select all these branches, and click attach. There we go. Okay, so let me restart the X forms. Collapse all. And I'm going to set this to 0, 0, 0. And what we're going to do is that we're going to export it out to Unreal. But before we do that, I want to make sure that my element modes have been set up correctly. So if I select on select ID 1, all right, that's my ID 1. Set ID 2, perfect. That's exactly what I want. All right, so we're going to export this out. Now before we do that, let me just unhide all. The one thing I didn't show you guys with this, the one thing I actually skipped is how to get wind. Because to do wind, you actually need to set up vertex coloring. But what we'll do is that we'll select one of these branches and I'll make the branches, I'll make this branch into a bush, and then we'll animate the bush to have wind. Hopefully we can do in the next 20 minutes. So let me rotate this, and then make it an instance. So I'll make it a copy and just give it a couple copies like that. Change a couple scales. So this can also work as a bush. Okay, so I'm going to select on this, Alt Q, select on one, attach list, select all of them. Perfect. Reset the X form, collapse all, set it to 0, 0, 0. Unhide all. Okay. So let me export my bush. Desktop. Unlimit SM for static mesh. Bush. Hit save. Make sure you have smoothing groups on. Hit OK. Hide. Select my tree. File. Export selected. SM tree, hit save. Yep, perfect. Okay, so now let's open up Unreal and load up these assets.